Hey, hello and welcome everyone. Welcome back to this video, and in this video series we are discussing about presigned URLs, and today video we are going to talk about Lambda function, how to create a presigned URL using a Lambda function. So let's get started. Here are the first few steps. So we'll go about creating the Lambda function from scratch. So just provide some name, and for the Node.js version I'll select the default version. The next steps involves defining the role for this Lambda function. We'll go with the default role, and then we'll create the function. So once the function is created, we'll get a sample code snippet. So I'll replace it with my code snippet. You can find the code snippet in the blog post that I'll be providing in the link below. So the first part is just including the SDK. And then in the second piece of the code on line number 9 and 10, we have the parameters that we'll have to provide, the bucket name and the object key that we'll have to provide as a parameter to generate the presigned URL. Now let's go to the configuration. We are still not done with the role. We have to assign some more permission for the S3 and bucket and the object access to this particular role. So by default, you can see here some Lambda function roles have been assigned, but we will attach an inline policy, and in this inline policy we will choose S3 services, and we will give some basic permissions to the Lambda function for the operation that we intend to perform. So we'll give from the read option, we'll select the getObject property. So we will confine the permissions for this role to getObject, because we are only going to do a getObject operation for now. And as for the second part, we also have to define the resources. So from the security best practice point of view, it is always good that you confine the access to only the required resources. So for here, what we'll require is that we'll need a bucket name. So that would be fetched from the S3 dashboard. So we'll go back to our S3 dashboard to fetch the bucket name and the object. So click on the bucket name, and that will take you inside, and you can then click on the properties to reveal the ARN name. So here, because here you can see the ARN is already defined, we just have to provide the bucket name. So just copy the bucket name and paste it there. Now if we select any, that would mean that we are giving anonymously any or all buckets are allowed. So that's not the case that we would like to go ahead with. So we'll just confine it to the particular bucket where we have our intended object. But inside of that bucket, we are allowing that any object could be like operated upon for the get and the post operation that we want to perform with the signed URL. So just add this, and then just to review, you can see here this is a very basic set of properties or access that we are allowing the Lambda function, because this role to which this policy is attached, that role is attached to a Lambda function. So we, as you can see here, we are only allowing Tech Hub Bookstore bucket, but inside of the bucket there is all the objects have access to the Lambda function. So now we'll define some name for this particular policy, and we'll create the policy, and that's it. We are done from the policy, and all the permissions are now available for the Lambda function to go ahead with the operation. Now here we will change the parameters to point to the bucket and the object names. So just paste the bucket name, and then we'll go back to objects, and we'll go back into the properties to look for the correct name, and just copy this, and we can go back and paste it back into the second parameter. And now we are all set to go. We can until you deploy this, change will not get into effect. So now we will create a test to run this script, and we can name it just test and just create it, and then we can go back and execute this test. So let's run this test and see what we get. So here you can see a URL is returned. So this is our presigned URL. So let's copy this and put it in the browser to test whether the object is getting accessed or not. So the object is a PDF file. It is a AWS certification exam guide. So as you can see here that the PDF is loading properly. Now I have initiated the stop clock for 60 seconds, and as you can see at the end of 60 seconds the URL, when I refreshed, it expired. So if you want to again get I have again reinitiated the test. Now again you can copy the renewed URL and you can test it out, that again it is valid for another 60 seconds, and as you can see here that the renewed URL is again working fine. Now you can see here that in the arguments that is in the test suite, you can define the parameters here like this, and then you can run the test, and these arguments can be captured in the bucket and the key parameters, and then it can be processed when you run the test, and you will again get the same results. So that introduce some level of dynamicness to the way you are passing the bucket name and object name to the Lambda function. So that's all for today's lab. Thanks for watching, and please stay tuned for the next video. In the next video, we are going to look into put operations, put object into a bucket, or uploading a file object into a bucket using presigned URL.